So that song got me through some very dark moments in my own life. And that's really the whole point of our teaching, is that we have something to hang on to when we feel broken, when we feel not enough, when we feel as if things are coming apart in our understanding of who we are, that we have something that we can lean into, something we can grab. I mean, at that point in my life, I was grabbing on, which we know the Buddhists teach us that we shouldn't grasp. But sometimes you just have to, right? When you feel like you're drowning. Anybody, can I get an amen? All right. So I asked Sharon to sing that song because I think we're in the third week of our book study. And this, to me, is our most complicated principle. So is everyone ready to breathe with me into this principle? Yeah, because there's so much here. This is basically like, the third principle is basically what my life study has been. So we're going to start. So these are Ellen Debenport's principles. And so for those who haven't been with me for week 1 and week 2, we're now in week 3. I'm going to do a very brief overview. You can watch those talks where there's more in-depth. For the last 2 weeks, you can find them on our YouTube channel. Unity in Marin has a YouTube channel, and all of our videos are there, and you can watch them so that you can sort of get the foundation piece. But Ellen Debenport's version of our 5 principles is God is absolute good, everywhere present. Human beings have a spark of divinity within them, the Christ spirit within. Their very essence is of God, and therefore they are also inherently good. And we've had long conversations around this inherently good, and what does that mean? And so check out last week's talk. The third principle is human beings create their experience by the activity of their thinking. Everything in the manifest realm has its beginning in thought. Now, here's Unity in Marin's version of these principles. There is only one power and one presence. God is all there is. Notice how we got rid of the good thing? Therefore, this one power and presence lives as each one of us. Each one of us is an individualization of all there is in God. We are divine. And because what that means, our divinity means, is the third principle. Our consciousness determines how we navigate and experience life. The thoughts and feelings that we nurture bear fruit in our lives. We are responsible for our consciousness. Can you feel the difference between that one and this one? Okay, we're going to dive into that more. I'm going to do a brief overview. How do we understand this idea of one power and one presence, right? And I've talked about the 3 faces of God, which, again, Unity doesn't believe that God is a being. Unity believes that God is beingness. So instead of calling it the faces of God, because what does that automatically call to mind? A being, right? We're calling them the 3 perspectives of the divine. And the way this works is that human beings intrinsically process the world through first person, I, second person, you, and third person, it, he, she. Everyone with me? Right? That's how we understand the world. Well, that also means that that's how we understand the divine. So, right, first person is an interior, subjective experience. It's mine. It's my personal understanding of something. The you, second person you, is a shared relational experience. It's how we get to be with each other. And then the third person perspective is it, or he, or she. And that's an exterior objective experience. They went to the store. The stars are shining. It's an objective. We're noticing something about something else. So how that translates in how we understand the divine is that the first person would be what we in Unity call the I am. the silence, maybe the presence, maybe Christ Buddha consciousness. It is how we, in the first person, understand the divine. And then in the second person, we have Jesus. Or perhaps we might call it the mirror self. Or we have the beloved. Or we have Kuan Yin or Buddha. And thanks to somebody's comment to me last week, I've added Mary. Right? Because Mary is there too. This is more in the second person of somehow a being. Can we feel that? And then third person, in unity, we would call it the realm of the absolute. We would call it divine principle. We would call it the universe. We would call it infinite allness. Some might call it spirit. Everyone still with me? Okay. So, how this ties into how we understand the divine is that from the first person, from the third person, we get to recognize something about the divine. God is love. It's one of unity's main understandings. God is love. God is peace. God is joy. From that recognition of something, we then can realize that within ourselves, because if I am the divine, that means that I am love. I am peace. I am joy. And then for unity, because we don't believe that God is a being, how the second person shows up, relational, is through sharing it with each other. How do I show up in community? How do I, the divinity that you are, our second principle, we are divine, that is what I am in relationship with, your divinity. And your divinity is in relationship with my divinity. Everyone still with me? Okay. So we have meditation and stillness supports the I am understanding of the divine. We have contemplation and visioning supports our understanding and be able to recognize the divine. And then we have how we show up in service and in prayer and in community for us to be in relationship with the divine. All of that is needed. We can't leave one of those pieces out or we feel incomplete. So what you can recognize, you can realize, and then you can share it with the world. And this is how unity holds transformation happening on a global scale. But it asks us to make sure that we are sharing it with the world. Unity is not about sitting on our cushion, having an inner experience, which is powerful. Don't get me wrong, I love to sit on my cushion. But it's also about how do I then show up in the world as love? What does that mean? How challenging is that? Anybody in here find that challenging? All right, and next week we're going to talk about prayer and meditation and how we can support ourselves in this. So, last week we talked about being a divine human. That the tension that we get to hold is between the relative, what's happening in our life, what we're actually experiencing in time and space, and then what is, in unity, we would call the realm of the absolute. Love, joy, peace, harmony. And there's a tension there because our life experiences, do they always go the way we want them to go? Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? So the call is for us to be a divine human. We don't believe in dismissing our humanity. I love my humanity. Do you love your humanity? I hope you do, right? I love being able to touch and taste, and I love to be in time and in space. And the container that I want to invite to hold my life with, and that's a small L life, is the large L life. That's the realm of the absolute. So let's get to our third principle. This is Davenport's, and then here's Unity's. Human beings create their experiences by the activity of their thinking. Everything in the manifest realm has its beginning in thought. Unity in Marin says, our consciousness determines how we navigate and experience life. Our thoughts and feelings that we nurture bear fruit in our lives. We are responsible for our consciousness. I get chills when I read our third principle. So let's dive into this a little bit, because the first question that always comes to my mind, this is, if you've been in Unity for a long time, or if you've been in New Thought for a long time, you know this expression. Change your thinking, change your life. And it has been, again, this is the world according to Deanne. It has been watered down by a lot of things, so that somehow there is this belief out there in the world now, which is kind of cool that our tools have sort of made the mainstream, but they're not grounded in our foundational understanding. So what you get, like I watch on TikTok, there's this whole affirmation channel, and you've got folks on there saying things like, I am lucky, I am prosperous. Does it mean anything if you're not actually, like just changing the words that you're saying, is that actually going to change your life? No. So there's a simplistic level that feels like God is a vending machine out there. And that is not what Unity actually believes. Okay, let me be really clear. We do not believe that God is a vending machine. And if I say, God, I want a red Maserati, I just kind of pull the lever and zoop, there's the red Maserati. That is not what we believe. We believe in something that is much more complicated and much richer and much more nuanced. And unfortunately, in our world of short bits and 30-second spots, the nuance can get lost. That's why we step into these things like book studies. So sometimes this is called the law of mind action. Right? The idea that our thinking. So what do we mean by thinking? This has evolved over time. What we mean by thinking now is not just a mental activity that is isolated and happening just in our thoughts. What we mean by thinking is our thoughts, our beliefs, our feelings. That is what we mean by thinking. Can everybody get on board with that with me? We've expanded and understood. Science has evolved. We now know that, the heart actually, the emotions of our heart can actually create an idea and a thought. It doesn't always go the other way. It doesn't always start from this mental activity. And if anybody in here has tried to transform, if we just do it on a mental level, does it work? It doesn't. If it's not in our body, if it's not in our bones, if it's not in the very deepest understanding of who we are, then we feel stuck. So this is from my book that Linda and I are wrote, that'll be out in September. Thoughts are formative, which means ideas, mental images, and emotions work together. Ideas form mental images that evoke emotions. Mental images trigger thoughts and emotions. Emotions give rise to ideas and mental images. One strengthens and validates the other, leading to further resonant thoughts, mental images, and emotions. So can you see how it's not one thing? It's all of it working together that allows us to have a belief. It's not just an idea that we have. It actually is an emotional understanding that we have. And we actually have mental pictures that go along with that understanding. And when they all can align, then we are powerful. Now, sometimes they align in a way that we wish we weren't so powerful, because they can align in a way that doesn't support us. They can align in a way that makes us feel small. They can align in a way that isn't about our greatest expression of our true self, but the stories that we've heard and we've absorbed. So, this part I think is really important to know, because I hear this a lot from people in New Thought. They'll say, oh no, I can't think that. Like if I'm in pain, I can't think about being in pain because I'm just going to create more pain. I can't have a negative thought. If I have a negative thought, it's going to show up in my life. And there's a lot of, surprisingly, fear and anxiety and worry about that. So what is actually showing up in our life? Fear, anxiety, and worry. But I want to be really clear. While thoughts are formative, not all thoughts are creative. Breathe with me on that. And we know this, right? Because honestly, if all thoughts were creative, my brother would have been dead 27 times in my lifetime. I'm gonna kill you! And if thoughts were actually creative, and let me tell you, I had everything behind that. I had an emotional narrative, I had a physical awareness, right? But they weren't actually creative. Feel the difference? So creative thoughts are those that are particularly potent. They have been held persistently and are backed by strong emotion and conviction. This is the case for wanted as well as unwanted thoughts. It's that conviction that we really want to be looking at. And here's the thing. We are so powerful. We are so powerful that those beliefs and convictions and ideas that we have about ourselves and the world, we actually are creating them. We actually are. So let's also be very clear, because this does not mean that we personally have created all the world's challenges, heartache, loss, and pain. Whew. Okay? Personally have not necessarily done any of that. It does mean that collectively we contribute to those challenges, heartaches, loss, and pain. Can you feel the truth of that? It also means that we have choice in how we navigate those challenges, heartaches, loss, and pain. And this is where the empowerment comes in. This is why I love Unity, because it doesn't leave me wandering in the wilderness, to use a biblical metaphor. It gives me very strong tools to say, how do I want to meet this? How do I want to navigate this really horrible, nasty, uncomfortable, painful thing that is showing up in my life or showing up in those I love or showing up in the world? How am I going to meet this? And this is where we do have a choice. We have a choice in how we meet it. Now, I want to talk about spiritual malpractice. Spiritual malpractice is when people take this very nuanced, right, complicated understanding of how we are creating all the time and toss it back and say, well, it's your fault you have cancer. Change your thinking. It's your fault. You didn't get clear enough about who you truly are. So you brought this horrible thing onto yourself. Can you feel that? It's one of my little pet peeves. Spiritual malpractice is rampant because we confuse the fact that we are not personally responsible, that there is a collective consciousness that we're all swimming in, that there are things that we absolutely can get clear within ourselves and we can transcend collective consciousness. I have done it. And there are things that we don't transcend collective consciousness yet. That the evolution of our collective consciousness is not just restricted to my lifetime in this body temple. We're talking about the evolution of consciousness. And we are part of that evolution of consciousness. And we may not get to necessarily see it in our personal lifetime, but we are being invited to contribute to it in a really powerful, meaningful way. Can I get an amen for that? This teaching is not about shame and blame. This teaching is not about what you did wrong, as Sharon so beautifully sang. It is about the fact that it all fades into God, and I am that. So there is something else there for me to be nourished by, for me to create from. And this comes back to this idea, the collective consciousness. You know how sometimes you're in the middle of something and you're like, I'm doing all the work. I'm feeling myself shift, and yet I still feel like Sisyphus trying to push a boulder up the hill. Anybody here relate to that? Because it's not just you're transforming in that moment. You are part of the transformation of collective consciousness. And that is a heavier lift. I find that comforting, actually. When I get stuck, when I feel like I'm stuck, what I call in that moment is every other person on this planet who is doing this work with me around this, that we are joined together and none of us is alone. And that through that, we can shift collective consciousness. Ernest Holmes says this: perhaps more than anyone understands or believes, the sum total of everyone's thought is a mirage of the ages. It would be well to think of it this way, that you may not condemn yourself. There is the me, that is the I am, and there is this transcendent understanding, third person, and we are dancing with all of it. And then there's how we get to show up for each other. This is the dance that we're being invited into as creators. Our personal experience, that larger awareness, I call it transcendent and immanent, and then relational. And all of it, this teaching, I'm going to say it again and again and again and again, this teaching is about compassion. This teaching is about healing. This teaching is about love. It is not about guilt or shame or blame. It is the antidote to our guilt and our shame and our blame. It is there to remind us of our divine nature, and that we are capable of choosing anew, that we can choose something new in every moment. Breathe with me on that, because we get caught up in the story and we think we have no choice. We always have a choice. When I was senior minister at Unity of Berkeley, there was this wonderful woman, and she and I became very good friends. And she was diagnosed with ALS. And ALS will slowly but surely paralyze you until your lungs literally can't breathe anymore, and that is the end of your life. And she navigated ALS for about 5 or 6 years. And I got to tell you, she was such an inspiration to me. Susan would sit there, and granted, we were working together on this. She wasn't alone in this. But she said to me at one point, she said, ALS has been such a gift in my life because it is forcing me to know that I am more than my body. It is forcing me to understand how much larger I actually am. And it was incredible how she navigated that. She had a window in her room, and there was a tree, and that was her contemplation. That was her place of inspiration. That was her place. She would just, at one point, she couldn't move her head anymore. And her family would set her up in such a way so that she could see the tree. Because that was a constant reminder for her of life, of her eternal life. That she was something much bigger than just what this body was. And that is the point of this teaching, so that we can bring compassion and healing and love even to the most horrific circumstances. And that we can always remind ourselves that there is something more than these beautiful, magnificent bodies. It is that piece of being the divine human. So, third our third principle says our consciousness determines how we navigate and experience life. The thoughts and feelings that we nurture bear fruit in our lives. We are responsible for our consciousness. Whoa. That's big, right? We are responsible, because that's where some of this malpractice comes in. You're responsible. So what if we actually hold the world responsible to mean what it actually means? Able to respond. We are able to respond from our consciousness. How does that shift for you? Does it take some of the weight off? And the question is, where are we creating from? Because we are always creating. Where are we creating from? Are we creating from our humanity, which we love, but is a very small understanding of what's truly possible? Our humanity that gets caught up in the pain and the loss and the heartache. And I'm not saying we ignore that, because that would be another thing called a spiritual bypass, and we don't want to do that any more than we want to do spiritual malpractice. But we are being invited to anchor our divine understanding of who we are so that we can hold our human experience and create what that is going to be for us. This is not magic. As you step into this teaching, it does not mean that everything in your life is going to go exactly the way you want it. It does not mean God is not a vending machine, right? It does not mean that as I declare or decree, as Sharon so beautifully sang, what are you declaring and decreeing? Are you declaring and decreeing from your human sense of lack and smallness and not enough? Or are you declaring and decreeing from the divinity that you are? And that, there is nothing that can stand in opposition to that. And that's what my friend Susan did. She declared that ALS did not define her. She declared that she was a loving, compassionate person and that she was more than whether or not she could move her arms and legs. She declared that she was going to meet life from gratitude, appreciation, and from love for as long as she was experiencing it in her body temple. And it was amazing. It was an amazing thing. So inspirational to watch her navigate that with so much grace. And that is what our teachings offer to us. What you can recognize, love, grace, beauty, you can realize, I am love, I am grace, I am beauty, even if I can't move off this bed. And then I can share it with the world. She would send me pictures of her tree. She would text me, voice to text through Alexa, and she would say, I'm looking at my tree, and I'm so grateful, and I'm so grateful for you, and I'm so grateful for life. She was sharing it with the world. So let's take, is that a lot, you guys? Whew. All right, so let's take all of this into some meditation so that we can integrate a little bit, right? Everybody just stretch out a little bit. Shake it out a little bit. Whew. Right? This is why I love this stuff, right? Are you enlivened right now? I'm enlivened right now. Whew. Oh. Yeah, we can applaud being enlivened, right? Practical tools, that's what we offer, practical tools. So let's breathe into the I am. So we're going to start by recognizing something about the divine. What is it that in this moment is calling to you? The infinite allness, what is something about that is calling to you? Beauty, love, grace, harmony, abundance, joy, love, strength, compassion. What is calling to you right now? What can you recognize that would be useful to you in this moment? And just allow that to grow in your awareness. Whatever that quality is, And the invitation is to bring it close, to bring it inward. It's not something that's outside of you. It's not something that's separate from you. It's the very essence of you. So I like to imagine that there is that within me that's rising within me to meet the idea that I have. And there's this beingness that we're being invited into. Knowing that you are that. Love, grace, beauty, abundance, joy, compassion. And then what are you called to create with that you are? How can you show up for yourself, for the world? What is it that is speaking to you about how you can activate the truth of your being in time and in space? What is that creative urge? How is that going to show up through your voice, through your hands, through your heart? Just allow that to continue to speak in ways that you can understand as we rest together for a few minutes in the silence. So I invite you in this moment to continue to open into the idea that I am creative, that I am choosing to be whatever you feel called to be, and that it is expressing as you with ease and grace in new and powerful ways. And just allow yourself to be in that vibrational field of it is done. It is done. And so it is. Amen. Ashe. So today's affirmation, I am open to the flow of divine ideas. I am creative. Can we know this together? I am open to the flow of divine ideas. I am creative. I want you to turn to the person next to you and say, you are open to the flow of divine ideas. You are creative. And you at home watching can tell it to me, and I receive it, and I know that you are open to the flow of divine ideas, and you are creative. Say thank you to your partner, and then let's all together just say, we are creative. We are creative. And so it is. Amen.